Okay, so we have this chord chart right here. The ones in blue are diatonic. Those are the chords that are made up only of notes inside of the key. There are 7 unique notes, and there's 7 chords built off of there. There's only 6 right here. That's because I've hidden the 7th one. It's a little bit, it's not that useful in this context, and you'll discover it later, but it's just easier to just put it out of the way for now because it might make things unnecessarily complicated. The ones here in yellow are what we're going to call borrowed chords. This is just major versions of the minor chords that occur diatonically. You can see they're in capital letters instead of in lowercase letters. And then the opposite of that, here's the 4 chord, but minor instead of major, which is why it's lowercase instead of uppercase. And then we've got these ones, flat 3, flat 6, flat 7. We're going to explore all of these in time, but it's nice to see those here. Down below, you can see diatonic 7th chords. That's instead of having a triad, that is triad 3 notes, you're having 4 notes, and you're just stacking up every other note of the notes that are, again, diatonic to that key. You end up having, just like this is a major chord, this first one becomes a major 7th, then a minor 7th, then a minor 7th, then a major 7th, and then this dominant 7th. We're going to see all of these in just a second, just telling you what you're going to see here. And then these ones, because they're already outside of the key, we wouldn't say what the diatonic 7th chords are, but we would talk about what the common extensions are. And again, music theory is descriptive, not prescriptive. It's not like a recipe that says you have to have this many grams of flour to this many grams of yeast in order to get bread. It's not how it works. We're just describing things that happen in the musical universe so that we can talk about them, and we can say to the bass player, hey, we're going to play Bring It On Home to Me. Okay, what key? I don't know. F sound okay to you? Yeah, great. And then we just go play. So these things are all descriptive. We're just using these to be able to communicate with other musicians. Okay, speaking of Bring It On Home to Me, this one, we're looking at it. It's good if you ever change your mind about leaving me behind. C, G7, C, C7, F. Okay, right here we're looking at probably the key of C, because look, here's C, here's F, here's G. The first one that has an extension is G7. We expect this diatonically, the 5 chord, to be a dominant 7, so that makes sense. The only thing that is even slightly confusing about this would be this C7. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, that we're using the C7 to pull to the F. So C, F, and G, 1, 4, and 5. This is a pretty basic tune, and of course I chose it for exactly that reason, because it just has these 3 chords. Could it be in a different key? I don't know. Well, we've got G and C here in the key of G, and then F could be the flat 7, but there's sort of an Occam's razor thing going on where the simplest explanation is probably the best explanation, and that's certainly true right here. So we know Bring It On Home to Me happens in the key of C. All right, let's do the next song in here. Good riddance. Time of your life. G, C add 9, and D. We can just sort of collapse C add 9 into being C for right now. When we're looking at this, okay, well, we know in the key of C, we've got C and G. We even have E minor. We don't quite have D. We have D minor. Is there another one that makes more sense? Well, probably for a lot of songs, the chord you start with or the chord you end with is going to be the key of the song. In this case, that's definitely true. G, C, or C add 9. D, we've got E minor. Okay, that's all the chords of this song, all diatonic in the blue part right here of the key of G. So this one's pretty easy. You've got 1, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4. Okay, easy, super easy. All right, onward. Stand By Me. A, F sharp minor, D, E. So here's D, here's F sharp minor, here's A, but not E major. It's showing it as E minor. Let's try the next one here. What about A? A, F sharp minor, D, E. Okay, this is diatonic to the key of A. 1, 6, 4, 5. It's a very, very common chord progression. That one's going to be in the key of A. Pretty easy so far, right? Let's do one more easy one. Same key. Kind of the same chords, different order. Starts with the same A. thinking, yeah, definitely this one's also in the key of A because it's got A, it's got E, it's got F sharp minor, and it's got D. This is a super common chord progression. 1, 5, 6, 4. This is also No Woman, No Cry in the chorus by Bob Marley, and 1,000 other songs that you absolutely know, like Let It Be from the Beatles. Let's look at something that's a little bit more interesting. Here's the song Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, and it starts on F. So right away I'm going to go, okay, well, is it in the key of F? Well, let's go take a look. Here's the key of F down here. We've got F. Well, we have G minor instead of G. Could it be G? Could it be this borrowed 2 chord? Sure, it could be that. That could even make sense in terms of the F major 7 that we hear when they're doing. But is there something else that makes more sense? Well, where else do we have F and G? Oh, right here, F and G. F major 7, G, F, and then A minor to G, and then G to F. So A minor, F major 7. Look, we're right here. We're in the key of C, which means that this song is, for the almost the entire thing, is just playing the 4 to the 5, and at no point does it go to the C chord, which is kind of a strange thing. And when it ends on the F major 7. So it kind of breaks those little rules that we had come up with, like what chord does it start with, what chord does it end with, but it's still in the key of C. If you're playing notes from the key of C over these chords, it's going to sound great. So that's a more interesting example because we didn't see the things we quite expected to. All right, here we're on Hey Jude. We've got, just like the last one, starts on the F chord. So I suppose it could be just like the last one in the key of C. Here's F, here's C, C7, maybe, because we're expecting C major 7. But, you know, we did see that with Bring It On Home to Me, where we had the C7, even though the song was in the key of C. And we use it to get back to the F. Let's come back to that one second. Look right here. Here we've got B flat. Well, B flat would have to be the flat 7 chord of the key of C. Not saying that's unreasonable, but it's less likely. Let's keep going. Look at the chorus. F7, that where we would expect the F to be F major 7. D minor, yeah, that works. G minor, not so much. Let's look at some other options, and let's do the thing we kind of always do, like, well, maybe the first chord of the song is the key of the song. So let's go look at F. And sure enough, here's F, here's C, we have C7, and we're expecting this 5 chord to be the dominant 7 chord. So that's a pretty good indication. Here's B flat, sure enough, B flat is the 4 chord. And we're just playing 1, 4, and 5 in the key of F up here. And when we get to this chorus, we've got B flat, yep, that checks out right here. We've got D minor, that checks out right here. G minor, yep. And the C is the C dominant 7. So yeah, we think this song is in the key of F. Let's talk about those dominant 7 chords for just a moment. The 5 chord in any key pulls back to the 1 chord. And it's just a simple matter of this. Our brain really wants to hear that story completed. So when we stop on that 7th scale degree, our brain wants to fill in that extra information. And in the same way, if we were to go backwards down that, the other space in the scale where there's a half step, that is 2 notes that are only 1 fret apart, those half steps are leading tones, is what they're called. They lead your ear up to the next tone that's in there. And when you're playing G7, oops, it's got both of those half steps built into that. Check it out. This one's going down to this one. This one's going up to this one. This is part of the G7 chord. And this is the C chord right here. And that's why the 5 chord sounds like it really wants to go back to the 1 chord. That's an important concept to understand. And once you have it sort of in your brain that that's a thing, then really quickly you start to see other connections. Remember over here when we were talking about Bring It On Home to Me? Change your mind. this C7 right here is not in the key of C. It's not what we expect to see. The diatonic 7th chord in the key of C would be C major 7, but yet we're playing this C7. What's happening right here is we're playing C7 because, just like in Hey Jude, C7 pulls to F. So we're using this thing called a secondary dominant chord, which is a really fancy highfalutin theory term that you don't really need to know, because we can think about those in terms of borrowed chords. Here we have American Girl by Tom Petty, and we could say, well, I don't know, maybe it's in the key of A because we've got A and D and E, which is 1, 4, and 5 in the key of A, and the G could be the flat 7 of that key. That doesn't seem all that unreasonable, but then again, the song starts on D. In fact, it stays on D for a really long time up top. So probably we should try D. What comes up when we do that? We've got D, E minor instead of E7, which is what we see here. Well, I guess that could be this 2 major or dominant 2. What else is in here? Well, this is 4, the G is 4, A is 5, B minor is 6. Look, we do have E minor in here, so that's the regular 2 chord inside of the key of D. I feel pretty confident, pretty comfortable calling this the key of D. So what's happening when we play this E7 chord? We would call this the 2 major or the dominant 2. It's not super important how you call it or how you think about it. It's just we're borrowing it from a neighboring key. And so that's why these ones here tend to be called, these yellow ones here, tend to be called borrowed chords. It's a much simpler way of thinking of things than with a secondary dominant, which can start to sound like a math equation instead of like, hey, I'm just hanging out with my friends playing music. Okay, let's look at some more borrowed chords. Here's Creep by Radiohead. This is the whole song right here. It's just these 4 chords, G, B, C, and C minor. Well, let's take a look here. G is where we start. Right away we get to this B minor. B minor is not what we see in the song. B major is what we see in the song. So it could be this 3 major or this dominant 3. I don't really play the 7, but we'll call it 3 major. And then you've got the 4 chord, C, and then 4 minor, C minor. This is a really important idea, that we're going from the 4 major to the 4 minor. We expect to see the 4 chord B major all the time, and then to the 4 minor, and then back to the 1. We talked about leading tones just a minute ago, where we talked about how the 7th chord leads us back to the 1 chord. And you're seeing the same sort of thing. We're like manufacturing new bits of tension that we can resolve away because it just sounds really satisfying. So when I'm playing the C chord, I've got the E is the 3rd. That makes it C major. And if you flat the 3rd, you've got C minor. And when you go back to G, the 5 of G is a D. So you've got this leading tones, half steps going down, and it really leads your ear along to the next chord, C, C minor, G. And that is how the 4 minor chord works. The Beatles love the 4 minor chord, and they use it all the time. So here's Nowhere Ma'am. Try E first and foremost because that's the chord that it starts with. What do we see? E, yep. B, yeah, so 1, 5, then the A is the 4 chord. That makes perfect sense. F sharp minor, okay, that'd be the 2 chord. A minor, not inside of our diatonic chords for the key of E, but right over here, 4 minor, that's that A minor chord right here. And when we look at the bridge here, G sharp minor to A, G sharp minor to A, that is totally something we expect to see. 3 chord to the 4 chord. Very confident calling this one being in the key of E. And we're playing E is 1, B is 5, A is 4, B is 1, F sharp minor is 2, A minor is the 4 minor. And the reason I chose to show you this one is that it doesn't come from 4 major, 4 minor, back to 1. It's just the 4 minor on its own. cool move. The Beatles, again, love that. So here's another one that uses the 4 minor chord and uses some borrowed chords in here. This is Daniel by Elton John. Daniel's traveling tonight on a plane. There's the D minor. So right away, like we think C to D minor, you're looking at 1 to 2, and then G, that's the 5 chord. So yeah, 1, 2, 5, this all makes sense. E7, okay, we had to borrow this one from outside of our key, but that's like a dominant 3 or a 3 major. And look what happens. We're using this E to get to A minor. Just like we said before, anything in this 5 chord column, the dominant version pulls back to the 1 chord. And that's true whether this 1 chord is a major, here's E7 to A, here's E7 to A minor. Has the same sort of movement. It pulls really hard to get there. So when we say we're using a borrowed chord, we just took this E7 from a neighboring key to create new tension to pull our way to the A minor. The A minor is inside of our key of C. There it is. It's the 6th chord. And just we gave a little bit more tension so that when we resolve it away, it just feels very satisfying. It's a very nice thing to do. Okay. I can see Daniel waving goodbye. F, G, A minor. That's 4, 5, 6 in the key of C. When we get over here, so then it does the little melodic instrumental bit. It does another verse that works exactly the same. And here's our chorus. We're starting on the 4 chord. Just 4 to 1, pretty easy. Your eyes have died. That's the 6. But you see more than I. Here's the 4. And then, Daniel, you're a star. Right here, this is the 4 minor. We went from F to F minor to C. 4 minor, 1. And again, that's that. You're a star. In the face of the sky. That A7 is not inside our key of C. We borrowed that chord. This is dominant 6 or 6 major, and it does the thing we've been talking about where this A chord pulls to the D minor. Here's A as the 5 chord in the key of D. Same way, A7 pulls over to D minor. Whoa, cool. So that is that idea of secondary dominance or borrowed chords. It's a dominant chord of this D minor. We just borrowed it from another key so that we could create new tension that resolves over to the D minor. And interestingly, and you're going to see this all over music now that you're sort of primed to notice these things, D minor, G7, C. D minor, G7, C. That's what's called a 2-5-1, and 2-5-1 is what jazz music is made up of. It's everywhere in there, both in the chords themselves that are the backbone of the song, and also in the minds of the people who are improvising over it. Even when there's not a 2-5-1 being played by the band, they will play notes that suggest 2-5-1 of whatever the next chord is. And that's really how jazz works. We're just superimposing different harmonic ideas that don't really exist in what the rest of the band is playing, but our soloing choices create that. And that's a much more advanced topic for once you have started to see all of these things really clearly, but it's not a huge leap. It's just a conceptual leap. And once you have that little epiphany, then it only takes, 5 or 10 years of dedicated work to be able to do that without having to think about it. Yay! Here's another one that doesn't start on the 1 chord and uses some borrowed chords. And, I don't know, it's got an interesting chord right here, this C augmented 7. And we'll talk about that in the context of we're creating new tension, we're resolving it away. It doesn't fit neatly into our little chord chart, but it's okay because the rest of the chords have a pretty strong suggestion. So F sharp minor, right away I could say, well, is this in the key of D? It's got an F sharp minor. It's got a B7. Well, I guess it could be dominant 6. It's got an E. Wow, that'd have to be a major 2. A C sharp minor. Wow, I don't have that either. Okay, so let's just rule out the key of D. It's already got a lot of exceptions. How about the key of A? Okay, F sharp minor would be the 6. B7 would be the dominant 2 right here. Okay. The E, that's 5. That sounds good. C sharp minor, that's 3. That's a possible A. That would be 1. We're back to F sharp minor. We've got the D as the 4 chord. The B7 again is the dominant 2. Okay. I mean, it could be the A. It's got a couple exceptions. Let's take a look at maybe here's another one that starts with F sharp minor, or rather, here's another key that has F sharp minor in it, which is our starting chord. F sharp minor. Okay, that's cool. B, and it's B7. We expect the 5 chord of E to be B7. All right, cool. E, okay, that makes sense. That's 1. C sharp minor, that's 6. A is 4. F sharp minor is 2. To B7, that's like a 2-5-1 right there. F sharp minor, B, E. This one feels like very much like E to me. And when I get into this section over here of feels like I'm resolving C sharp minor, C augmented 7 to E. That feels very much like E is the home base of this thing. So I'm going to call this thing as being in the key of E. And I just played that. That's that. Just like when we were doing 4, 4 minor, 1, and you had that walk down with those leading tones, you're getting the same exact thing as you walk from C sharp minor, C augmented 7 to E. Cool. This one is Every Breath You Take by The Police, and I chose it because it uses flat chords, chords that don't fit neatly into C, G, D, A, or E, which are sort of the guitar-friendly keys. This one starts with an A flat. So we're just going to take a guess over here and say, okay, here's A flat, F minor, D flat, E flat. Okay, this is actually the same thing as this one is actually this exact same chords as Stand By Me, just in a different key, a half step lower. But it's got that same exact movement. It's got the 1 chord, in this case A flat, F minor is the 6 chord, D flat's the 4 chord, E flat is the 5 chord. Okay, cool. That's not that difficult. When we get into here, oh, can't you see? You belong to me. So that's just 4 to 1, D flat to A flat. How my poor heart aches. B flat 7 with every step you take. That B flat 7 is right here. This is the dominant 2 chord, and we're using that. This is sort of a different 2-5-1, dominant 2, the 5 chord, back to the 1 chord. Okay, that's pretty hip. I dig that. That is part of our borrowed chords thing. Over here, we've got the bridge. I've been lost without a trace, dreaming that I can only see your face. This E, or as it's technically known in the key of A flat, is F flat, because this is F and F flat is actually E. Up to G flat. This is the flat 6 chord to the flat 7 chord. This is a movement that you see used all the time. So in the end of, with a little help from my friends, which is in the key of E, they play C, D, E. It's at the end of F Her Gently by Tenacious D. And that idea of the flat 6 to the flat 7 is also, it's in Plush by Stone Temple Pilots. It's in the key of G. It's got E flat major 7 to F. That's that. Cool, right? All right, so that is Every Breath You Take. Let's do one last one, and I chose this one not because it's got a bunch of crazy new stuff we haven't seen in terms of borrowed chords and what have you, but I chose this one because it has a key change in here. We're playing in the beginning, we've got this. C to F. Okay, so my mind automatically goes to, we're probably in the key of C because that's 1 to 4. That's a pretty common thing. What else happens in here? C, D minor, F, G. Yeah, those are all in here. You've got C is 1, D minor is 2, F is 4, G is 5. That makes perfect sense. C major 7 when you get to the chorus. We expect the 1 chord to be a major 7. Okay, that tracks. We expect the 2 chord to be a minor 7, so D minor 7. Okay, that's great. Let's go over here to what they've labeled the solo, which is kind of like the bridge section. We play this riff again. D minor to G, which again, 2 to 5, and then they do E minor, which is still in our key. Which is not really in our key, we borrowed that. But what's actually happening here is we're leading into a key change, and we're using 2, 5 to get into 1 in the key of D. Here's 2 is E minor, 5 is A, to D is 1. I don't need no money. Same thing we were playing before, but up a whole step in the key of D. So we've got 1 to 4 is D to G. And as we've got I guess you say D minor, E minor, D, A. Cool, really cool. So that is just a key change in there. So my advice to you is to take the songs that you know the best, that you know the chords to, and I want you to sit down and look at them on this chart, because you're going to see a couple things. The one is the thing we're talking about here. What key is this song in? Which of these chords is non-diatonic that we borrowed from some neighboring key, or we chose because it introduces some cool little tension that we get to resolve away with cool songwriting tricks. The second thing that you're going to notice is that a lot of the songs that you already know are really the same song, just in a different key, or with 2 chords to the measure instead of 1. Remember when we looked at Every Breath You Take by The Police, and we compared that to Stand By Me by Benny King, and we realized, wow, these are the exact same chords. These chords move in the same way. They're just in different keys. Stand By Me is in A, and it goes 1, 6, 4, 5. And Every Breath You Take is in A flat, and it goes 1, 6, 4, 5. This is really, really cool. And we noticed, too, that like sort of the bridge section of Every Breath You Take goes from flat 6 to flat 7, just like Plush from Stone Temple Pilots goes from flat 6 to flat 7 in the key of G. When you start to see these things, you start to make all kinds of new connections between the songs that you know, and then you make those connections with songs that you're about to learn, and you start to develop sort of a galaxy brain about these things. And it's just a question of paying more attention to what are the component parts of there, because this information is all around you all the time, but if you're not keyed into it, it just goes whoop, right over your head. You know, when I'm in Canada, there's French on everything. On the menu, there's French on the road signs, there's French on the little shampoo bottle in my hotel room. I don't understand French, so all of that goes whoop, but it all says something. There's all interesting information to be gleaned from that. And in the same way, if you pay attention to what chords go into what keys and how songs are connected to one another, you will start to have a better understanding of how music works. And not in some abstract, go to music school sort of way, study the Phrygian mode and learn all these goofy-ass things that you're not going to use. No, it's very, very extremely, most importantly, practical. Bottom line is it's practical. Get after it. Learn these things because it's going to make you a better player and it's going to make your understanding more complete. Thanks for hanging out with me.